So welcome everybody to Office Hours. It's our last session in September of 2019. And as we often do, we have a special topic session for the last Friday in the month. So this isn't quite our usual format. We're not going to take general questions, but there will be a panel back to do a general Q&A shortly, so bear with us and come back another week. So we decided to do this special topic session, and this was actually, yes, and we can all blame Anne Crawford for this one, because this came out of a conversation that Anne and I were having some time ago about, wouldn't it be a good idea to just talk a little bit in general about what it's like to work with a consultant. And I'm delighted, thank you to the wonderful ladies who've come onto the panel to share their experience. This is, as I always say at the beginning of Office Hours, this is not an official Salesforce.org session. We are all volunteers. Office Hours is a community-run effort and has been for the last few years. So we are volunteers. We're volunteering our time and our talents to have these conversations. And I am recording this because people do like to hear the topic sessions, but this is a safe space. As I say, there are some Salesforce.org people, I'm sure, listening in, but don't worry, this is not, as I say, this isn't an official session. And also the way that Office Hours usually works is that if you have a question, please put it in the chat first. It just helps us to see what's coming up and sort of doesn't quite interrupt the flow in the same way. But I think this is going to be more of a conversation. I've got some questions that I want to ask the panel to talk about, and I'm sure that there are other things that will occur to you. So, as I say, we're not going to talk specifically perhaps about particular Salesforce features. It's more about sharing the experience of I know that our panel, some of them are consultants, some of them have worked with consultants, talking a little bit more about, was it worth doing in the first place? What are the benefits of working with a consultant in Salesforce? What maybe are some of the disadvantages? And then how, if you decide that you are going to work with a consultant, how do you establish a really good relationship? And that's one of the things we kind of wanted to talk about from both sides, to know that, if a consultant's coming into a project, what sort of things might they be looking for or hoping to find with the client, and from a client point of view, how do you sort of manage the project and generally keep everything on track. And I know that while Angela and Karen are both working as consultants now, they've also had experience in organizations. So I think particularly Karen, you can definitely speak from both sides of this. So first of all, let's just quickly to sort of establish who's on the call, and especially just to sort of find out a little bit about sort of where you're coming from. Because I mean, Amanda, you are the one at the moment who is still with an organization, and but I believe you have worked with consultants. I think you were introduced to me by Trish Perkins. So do you just want to briefly talk a little bit about your Salesforce journey and who you've worked with?
Yeah, absolutely. So Trish is the one who suggested this session, and I worked with her at my previous organization, Literacy First, which is an early literacy tutoring program. We moved from other disaggregate database systems to Salesforce for the first time, and we used Trish as our consultant to kind of guide us in that process. And so that was really wonderful. I was the project manager for that process. I was managing a subset of the data, and then working with our other data manager and Trish to kind of move everything into Salesforce for the first time. And that was my introduction to Salesforce. I've had experience with other database systems, but that was really when I fell in love with Salesforce, and has steered my trajectory in a different direction. I'm now a certified admin and working at Mission Capital, which is an organization here in Austin, Texas, that is sort of a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits. Part of my role here is to administer our Salesforce database system. And I inherited it at the end of a process where the team was working with an external consultant group to kind of upgrade from Classic with Illuminate overlay to Salesforce Nonprofit Success Pack. So yeah, I've worked directly with consultant and then sort of inherited a system that had been moved through some consultant work. So yeah, that's a little bit of my story and background.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. So that's excellent. Yes, that's kind of a nice wide range of experience. Angela, did you start off with a nonprofit? I mean, I know you're a consultant now, but
yeah.
I
sure did. Yep. So my first job, my first official professional job was working for a university where I worked in did some recruiting for the honors program at the University of Texas at Arlington. And so some database work and recruiting type admissions type work there. And then after I graduated, my careers were both the jobs that I had after that before switching into consultancy were for nonprofits. So I managed a small nonprofit that did overseas development work in Guatemala and India, and then worked for an organization for quite some time that did work supporting orphans in Romania after the Ceausescu phenomenon in Romania in the 90s and earlier, where orphans were basically deprived of any kind of nourishment, human interaction, so that they would become soldiers. It was quite terrifying. And oh my gosh, speaking of terrifying, that was lightning at my house. So.
Oh right, yes, you said there were storms. Wow, yes,
I said that one. Storms. That's external evidence that I'm not lying to you all. So yeah,
they both sound amazing organizations. You said they were quite small. Were you kind of doing everything yourself, or did you?
I did. Yeah. Okay. We had an executive director, but I sort of wore the hat of development director, volunteer coordinator, sponsorship coordinators for when our programs had child sponsorship programs. Lots and lots of database work. We used Excel, we used Access, we used a system called Membership Plus, I think was the name of it. Anyway, yeah, lots of stuff on that end. And then went to work for a for-profit organizations that supported social service agencies. And I was a online training coordinator there, which was a much larger database that I worked in. And that was a homegrown database.
So that started sort of in a way to help you with the transition towards the consultancy.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And then I moved from there to Salesforce in 2012.
Wow. And now I know Now It Matters has supported a lot of different nonprofits. So okay. And Karen, just you were with, I think, quite a large nonprofit and had worked with consultants there. Is that right? Before you moved to bigger boat.
Well, when I started with the organization, it was actually a smaller nonprofit, but there was like 4 or 5 of us across the country, and we merged to become a larger one. And in that process, somebody selected a database solution that, well, let's just say wasn't helpful. So eventually I stepped into the role and said, we need to have a solution where we can get data out of the system. I don't know, novel thought. And so we chose Salesforce, and I worked with a consultant to bring Salesforce in and get it implemented and get us up and running. And then once we had it up and running, I was the admin, along with, as Angela said, and Amanda said, wearing many other hats, but was a Salesforce admin for a number of years. And then about 7 years ago, I joined bigger boat consulting. And so I've been consulting, working with strictly nonprofits to implement, or in some cases upgrade, Salesforce in their organization.
So I think let's start with, if Karen and Angela, if you wouldn't mind putting your past hats on just for a minute. I think I'm going to address this question to Amanda first. I'm kind of interested in this idea, in that decision point is, where in your organization might, where as you're sort of implementing Salesforce, might you decide that you really want to have a consultant, and is there some kind of tipping point? Is it just that generally when you're talking about Salesforce, do you get a bit kind of intimidated and think that maybe a consultant is the right thing to do? I mean, it's obviously it was a while ago, but do you remember what the conversations were as you went into this idea of, okay, we need some expert help?
Caroline, I apologize. My internet just paused while you were saying the question, and I just heard the tail end of it.
All right. Well, it was rather a long-winded question.
I think the gist is
the point of the decision. It's like, so why did you decide we need some expert help? We're not going to do Salesforce on our own. What would be, why call Trish? Or why call
Sure, yeah, great question. I think that at Literacy First, for our specific data needs, we knew that we had been using a couple different database systems prior, one that was built on a FileMaker Plus overlay, or FileMaker Pro, and then a system built by Pearson that we kind of hijacked to store some of the student data. And we knew that we needed something customizable. And I came into sort of the bidding process, or that like discovery of systems process, a little late to the game. But it seemed like we knew we needed something customizable, but we really didn't have the IT capacity to build something from the ground up. And so another nonprofit here in town, Literacy First, is an AmeriCorps program, and another AmeriCorps program within our network has been using Salesforce for some time and had worked with Trish. And I think just kind of had Trish on retainer as help was needed. So they recommended her. And then we had a phone call with her and a phone call with our sales rep to just kind of talk through, here are our basic requirements. Can Salesforce even do this? And the answers were yes, and the cost was not prohibitive. So we decided to try it out. But I think we needed guidance on where to start. I mean, I think that with technology solutions, it can be overwhelming to know what the best fit is. And I think that finding a way to basically using a consultant as kind of a guide to decide, is Salesforce the right solution for my problem, was really the lens we were trying to go through.
If I can say something to tack onto that, my answer would have been very, very similar. And when I was in the role that I was in at the last nonprofit I was at, and we were looking at needing to adjust the way that we were doing our database work, I knew that I had a fair level of technical competence and could probably figure it out, but I just had this feeling like, I don't know if I'm making the right decisions here. Am I going down the right road? Sure, I can read the documentation and figure this out, but, and one of the things that we hear from our clients now all the time is, we don't know what we don't know. And so one of the things that I think a consultant can bring is a breadth of experience in being able to say, yeah, you could do that. Here are the trade-offs, right? Like, these are some of the things that might result from that course of action. And, what you said about, being the right investment and knowing if Salesforce was the right direction. I think it's important when you talk with a consultant early on, you can kind of get a sense of if they'll tell you, if they're just going to say yes to everything, or if there are some clients that they'll say no to. And we've had clients that we say, Salesforce might not be right for you. You might need something like Little Green Lights or Neon CRM or something else. Because of that, you don't know what you don't know factor, And so I think when I was in the nonprofit seat and now when I'm in the consultant seat, that's something that I felt, and now we hear very often, is that a lot of times consultants are chosen. We're chosen because we know some of the things that the clients don't know. Not all of them, but some of them.
Or maybe
I'd add on to that too.
Please go ahead.
I'd add on to that too. I mean, it's similar. I actually had, prior to coming into the nonprofit world, had worked in the corporate world and actually implemented systems. So I knew I had the wherewithal and the knowledge to do that to do it. But having somebody who had worked with Salesforce, because I had not done that, and that had worked it more in depth with nonprofits, had that experience. And we were a fairly, decent sized organization, but honestly, there was really no one else there that at the time, I mean, there's some people that sort of moved into the realm of being stronger in the database IT world, but at the time that was not where they were. And so while I used a lot of the staff for helping to understand sort of workflow and processes better, I needed somebody else to work with me on it. And so it's like I needed a partner to help me implement it. And that's really the way my relationship with my consultants was, is that we were partnered in the process.
Oh, that's a very interesting point that you make, Karen, because yes, I mean, you've all said about how you wear multiple hats at a nonprofit, and I think that is so often the case, isn't it? Perhaps the largest nonprofits can have, dedicated, as it were, kind of IT staff, but often the Salesforce administrator or the person who is initially kind of given the, hey, Salesforce is your project, run with it, is also wearing many other hats or has many other roles. And that sort of thing of having somebody who you can kind of geek out a little bit, and also just ask Salesforce questions of who's not also got their head in lots of other things is maybe so yes, as you say, the sort of the partner idea, Karen, or the ally in the Salesforce world.
I would definitely agree with that.
Great. So then, I mean, so obviously there's a whole element of this sort of getting started. I mean, are there sort of other times when having the consultant or the partner is really helpful? And I mean, and how long did the relationship last? I mean, obviously there's that sort of getting started and point you in the right direction. I mean, Amanda, did you kind of carry on working with with Trish sort of afterwards, even when you were kind of up and running? And
yeah, we had a really long build out process. We took 15 months from start to finish, I think, before we went live with it with our group. Mostly because we had a community of about 100 tutors who were going to be using the community platform to enter data. So we really wanted to make sure that we got it right before we rolled it out. And we had Trish the whole way. I think certainly for the first 6 to 9 months as we were building the platform, we had weekly meetings with her to check in. We did it very agile, like what we're working on this week, what's everyone's roles and action items, okay, go, and then check in next week. And then as we got into like testing and adjusting things, she took more of a backseat, like, let me know when you need me role. I would say something that I really appreciated about our relationship fundamentally is that she took the lens of, let me teach you how to be the administrator, so that you can take this product and move forward with it without my involvement. And that was really, really helpful. Whether it was pointing us to trailheads or building out some like, this is how you need to do this piece. just really showing us, because there's so much documentation and so much help available for learning the Salesforce pieces if you know where to look. She really played that guide role of showing us the right places to look for the right information.
I think it that whole aspect of kind of helping an organization, not just actually kind of creating a solution for them, but also setting the organization up to succeed and to be kind of learning themselves is an important part of it, isn't it? Angela, it's something that actually you kind of it's part of really the success of the project, isn't it? Is helping the client to know how they can help themselves to move forward, I think.
Yeah, and I think what we've learned over time is that it may take a hard conversation or, a bit of an awkward conversation at the beginning of an engagement to identify what type of a relationship that a client wants to have with you. So what Amanda just described of, Trish working with you for, a long time and training you and teaching you how to use the system, and then you standing on your own two Salesforce feet, that is something that we've done with clients that's worked really well. And then sometimes there are clients that really don't want that, and sometimes that's surprising when a client might come our way that's like, look, we don't want to be Salesforce experts. We don't want to be able to do this on our own. Like, please, that's why we're hiring you. you all, please fix this thing, set it up, do the solution, train us on what we need to know, and then we want to go back to doing our jobs, raising money, or, whatever it is. And so I think that before any engagement starts, it's worth having that conversation to figure out, exactly how is this going to go. And we had an implementation just recently that launched where we had planned at the end of that implementation to have, on-site training where we went on site and we did training for the client, et cetera, et cetera. Well, during the course of the engagement, these clients got so excited about Salesforce and Trailhead that by the end, they didn't need us. And so we de-scoped doing some training because they were already standing on their own two Salesforce feet. And we were able to say, okay, let's, reallocate those dollars for future scope of work because, you don't need us to come and do this training for you. But, that took a couple of conversations that were a little bit awkward and us saying, okay, we're not just going to push through the scope of work, but what do you all need? And how do those needs adjust over time? And so, we've found that there are some clients that, like Amanda, you said, they want to know, they're eager to learn, they want to be able to do it on their own. And then there are others where you're treated more like a vendor, right? Like, we're buying this from you, please set it up, and then we'll contact you if there are problems. Both of those are okay. I would say it's just really important to identify which of those approaches that you're wanting, and to communicate that clearly to the consultancy.
Yeah, and I would tag on to that. Sorry, something really interesting. I just had a meeting with a consultant here in town who is framing his consultancy business off the basis of being sort of an ad hoc administrator for nonprofits, as Angela said, who don't want to learn or don't have the capacity to have someone on staff dedicate time to that. And so he's sort of doing like 10, 15, 20 hour a month retainers with organizations just to be their like one-off admin. So it's interesting because it seems like he's using that as a consultancy approach, and it's been very successful for him so far.
Yeah, that's great. That's interesting.
I want to tag on to, oh, sorry.
No, please.
Sort of what Angela said, as far as when you're going into an engagement with a consultant, it is really important to have those conversations about, what do you expect? And, do you want to be trained, so you can fly free and stand on your own Salesforce 2 feet? I like that. When the engagement is done, what's the time commitment during the engagement? The way we work is we're very it is a partnership, and so they're at the table with us throughout the entire project. And sometimes that's a conversation we have with them. It's not like, here, you go do it. We're gonna sit back and then you hand it back to us. So and every consultant is different. People approach it differently, but it's understanding and making sure you understand what their approach is, and you're clear on what you expect or what you can do during the project, what you want to do after the project, all of that, like having those conversations up front. While they sometimes may be hard, if you don't have them up front, they're going to be harder later.
Oh yes, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, Anna's just reminding me of something which I think this is a great question. Anne was saying that when she started out consultant and she was at a nonprofit, consultants would always ask her what her budget was or what her budget range was. And she got really suspicious of that question. But it's a really interesting one because, we did. There is a reason why we ask, isn't there? I mean, Angela or Karen, would you like to talk to that and try and put people's minds at rest a bit? I mean, why do we ask right up front about how much the client has to spend?
We do it for a number of reasons, largely because if you say you have $5, we're going to say, well, thanks, but we can't help you with $5. We're going to be upfront about that. If you say we're in this range, whatever the range is, we can listen. What we do is we do a discovery phase, and in that phase we're understanding what you need. And if we know your budget range, it doesn't change what you need, but it changes how we may approach it. And we may say, great, we can do this piece of the pie that you want, and in that process trade you how to do the rest of the pie, because you can't afford that sounded bad because your budget doesn't allow us to build out all of the pie for you. So it's that, or it's not that we're like, ooh, they've got way more money than we're going to spend. We're going to do what you need as much as we can, and knowing that budget range helps us to hone in on what is most important and what can be done in that budget, and let you know, like, this is what we can do. If you want to spend more, we can do this. If you want to spend less, that means that this gets cut, kind of thing. I mean, it gives us that talking point.
That's why we ask too, and we generally try to give 3 options. So we'll give a bare bones option, like if we were just to do the bare bones, and some of the things that you want, some of your nice to haves aren't going to be included, but this will cover most of the must haves, then it would be X. And if you want all of the must haves and maybe 1 or 2 of the nice to haves, it will be X. And if you want us to do the whole kit and caboodle, then it's going to be this price. And so it just helps us in identifying where some of those trade-offs are too, to know, well, here's our budget range. And then we can say, okay, well, for $25,000, this is what we can do. If we're talking 20, 30 or 40, then these are some of the options. And we very rarely, I don't know if I should say this or not, we very rarely actually recommend the most expensive project for a first phase of work. So we'll often recommend starting out smaller and kind of equate that, like, if somebody's on a bicycle and they want a car, like, we're not going to sell them the worst kind of car that's out there. We're also not going to try to sell them a Cadillac, right? Like, we're going to get them in like a Honda Civic or something that's just nice and reliable and gets them what they need to build some user adoption before you throw in all the bells and whistles. So, that's why we answer the budget question. And like you said, Karen, the same thing. If somebody says we have $3,000, that's not much time, for our staff. And so we're able to then say, okay, well, maybe you should consider these other choices. And it just, it helps with finding a better fit for the client.
Yeah, I think that is the key. So yeah, I think the message out to those of you who are listening on the call who are thinking about a consultant is, yeah, and it's not like we need a hard and fast number, is it? It's to get an idea of what the size and scale of this is going to be. So trying to figure out where we pitch what we talk to you about. Isn't that right?
I think it also, Brad has most of those conversations, Brad, the owner of Bigger Boat, but I think it also gives us a sense of what the organization is committing to as far as what they see the value of this as. I mean, you may still only have X budget dollars, but if they are really on the low end, it does tell us that maybe they're not really, maybe Salesforce isn't the solution. I mean, Salesforce, you get the 10 free licenses, it's great, it's super flexible, but if you're not willing to continue to invest in it, and I don't necessarily mean by invest and pay a consultant, but invest in making sure you have, you know, either a dedicated admin or an admin for hire, or, you know, you can implement Salesforce, but it doesn't stay the same. You have to, I mean, in my opinion, you have to continue to nurture and feed it, kind of like a puppy. Maybe not as needy as a puppy, but kind of like a puppy.
Oh, I don't know. It can have its moments. I mean, when you're coming up to a new release, aren't you? And you're getting kind of emails every other day saying, "Hey, you're about to be upgraded, and this is going to stop working, and here's this critical update." And there are times when it can be just as needy as a puppy, I think.
Well, true.
But maybe. Amanda, have you, from the other side of it, have you felt uncomfortable if you know the consultant is asking you up front how much you might be willing to spend?
You know, I haven't actually had that experience.
Okay.
I have not played the role of the money manager. I'm pre-Salesforce. I've been nonprofit operations, so someone else gives me a budget and I figure out how to work with it.
Okay.
I will say that one of the reasons that we appreciated Trish is that she was definitely better priced than some of the other solutions we looked at, software solutions. We didn't necessarily bid to different Salesforce consultants. We kind of found her and just went with her. Yeah. So I can't really speak to it.
But it's interesting going down this sort of this line a little longer, maybe about expectations. And by the way, if anyone who's listening in, if you have questions or have comments, please put in the chat. Or if you'd just like to say something, just let me know in chat as well, and come and join in and give your experience. So yeah, on this thing of expectations, so obviously there's the kind of budget side. I mean, what else from what are some of the other things as you talk to a client initially, Angela and Karen, that you kind of feel oh yeah, this sort of feeling of, yeah, I think this one's going to be a really successful project, or or maybe what are things where you think perhaps this, working with us is not going to be right for this organization? What sort of things do you look for to see whether the project is going to be a good fit?
We ask a question like, if you were to do nothing, what would happen? And if the question is just kind of we'd continue to use our Excel spreadsheets, or we'd continue to use whatever tool they access, but it's not great, but it would probably work. Then that gives us a sense that there may not be a sense of urgency or something when we ask that question, and people come back right away with like, we absolutely cannot do what we're doing right now. Like this is not working. We aren't able to serve our client, our constituents. we have to do something else. And we know, okay, they've got a fire in their belly to, to take care of this and to work on it. And I wouldn't say that there's one question, but we, like Karen, we often do a discovery phase or an assessment at the beginning where we talk to a lot of stakeholders and try to get a sense of what the stakeholder involvement is. And if at the end of that process, we feel like, that there's not an equal match in terms of commitment, we may recommend that they hold off or that they wait, because we want to make sure that everybody is engaged in the process. I'll say, like, the single thing for us that makes or breaks a client relationship or an engagement is how invested the main point of contact is, whether that's a executive sponsor or the admin, but that primary point of contact needs to be 100% on board. So that's something that we really try to suss out in discovery, and even sometimes in the sales process itself. It's like, who are we going to be working with? Let's get on the phone with that person. Are they excited about this, or are they seeing this as like, oh my gosh, now I have to implement Salesforce. This is one more thing. That's a big red flag for us. And we may not decide to bid on that project if we feel like, whoa, this admin or this person is totally overwhelmed, and this is just going to be one more thing on their plate. So those are some of the things that we look for. And then we refer to other consulting partners too. So like sometimes we'll get a client that comes our way that has a need that we know that Karen and the folks over at Bigger Boat are really good at. And, maybe we're decent at it too, but we're like, oh, this would be a really great match for Karen. And so we often make recommendations to other consulting firms if we know this might not be a good fit for us, but they're going to be a really great fit for Bigger Boat or Common Voyage or North Peak. And so we've got a nice, a healthy competition, I'd say, where we will make recommendations like that if we feel like something isn't quite a good fit for us.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think because we all work a little differently too, it depends on the client and what they need. Like some come, and it sounds like similar to Amanda, like we need somebody to sort of walk us through that Trish's model and the database Sherpa model. Like we want to work hand in hand, and so there's some people that that's a perfect fit for. Others need different things. So we definitely do a lot of referrals. I think as far as what do we look for, or what do we ask, what are we kind of trying to assess at the beginning? It's very similar to what Angela said. It's like, what are your pain points? Why are you even talking about it? Why Salesforce? We kind of have a standing joke that, one person in our office is like, I hate Salesforce. Why would anybody use Salesforce? It's kind of like, we always ask that, why Salesforce? If they've come to us already deciding on Salesforce. And then what is their goal out of this? What do they want at the end? And not just, we want Salesforce. So it's like, why? Why do you want it? To really understand, because sometimes people come to us and they kind of had pain, but not really. And the amount of pain, if you will, to go through a conversion and a migration and a implementation, it's like, I don't know if your pain's that bad. I think it's fine. You don't really need to go to the doctor right now. So I think it's kind of assessing that. The other thing we look for, similar to what Angela said, is we definitely require that there is an identified admin, because our model is we are working to train in the process. By the end of the project, we want a trained admin, so that at the end, it's kind of like we sent you off. We met at summer camp. We had this great time together. We built the thing, and now you're going back to your regular life. And we want them to be able to do that on their own. We do have sometimes like ongoing support for a period of time, but our goal is that they are up and running. And without that dedicated admin, it's just really hard. It's really hard to do it, and for us. And by dedicated, I don't mean necessarily 100% because some nonprofits can't do it, but there's like one person that is the admin and that is on the project actively working with us.
Yes, that's a really good point, and it's one that Donna made in chat as well. Thank you, Donna. This idea that that there's the kind of importance of making sure that there's a commitment, and that that there are people in the organization who are willing to put in the time and effort. Because I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Even if actually they've said, the organization has said, we just want you to do everything for us, it doesn't actually mean that they still need to invest the time in telling the consultant what it is that needs to happen, and making sure that it all works out right. Yeah.
Can I tag on to that?
Please
I think
do.
that is so critical too, because something I've noticed is just the okay, we've built it, ... now what? So like that whole component of like, yeah, identifying the person on staff to kind of help manage and administrate, but also like, how does this now inform business processes for the organization? Are we relying on our database? How are we like just those how questions that y'all were asking? And then how do we manage fidelity to the system? So it's one thing to have a database that does all this stuff for us and have the rules and the policies and procedures written about how to use it effectively. How are we ensuring that staff are using it that way? Are we checking the data? Are we checking for fidelity in processes? And that piece I find, I'm kind of nerdy because I find that piece so fascinating. and kind of like what I have really dedicated myself to is making sure that the system is user-friendly enough that people find fidelity to the system to be easy and second nature. So yeah, I think the identifying of the why, just like y'all were saying, and like the pros and cons of even switching, what are going to be the new pain points, right? Because pain points don't just go away, they just change. So maybe now your arm hurts your leg. And how do we mitigate future pain, and then how do we also set up a system to discuss improvements over time? So yeah, I find all of that really interesting. And I think that a consultant can help not identify any of those things from the beginning, but kind of just surface like, these are the things you're going to want to think about moving through time. Like once the product is built and delivered, 6 months out, a year out, 2 years out, make sure to take the time to reevaluate whether or not this product is really working, and then what improvements can be made, and can you manage those in-house, or do you need to circle back to a consultant again?
Yeah. You're not the only one who's nerdy when it comes to, oh, sorry, Karen, you're not the only one who's nerdy when it comes to that stuff, Amanda, because I am so intrigued and interested by user adoption and change management and like the psychology behind how people adopt systems. And
oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, and like one of the things that we don't do it all the time, but I started asking people on some of my projects, like to do a questionnaire, like, what's your Myers-Briggs type? Like, are you a visual learner or an auditory learner? It's just trying to figure some of that out so that I can weave in some of those things into, okay, like when I train this person, it's going to be helpful if they have a video that they can go back to, or, this person may not ever look at the video, but having a checklist is going to be helpful for them. And, the field of change management, I'll have to post a link to this article I read last week or maybe the week before on LinkedIn. I'll put it in the hub. There's this really interesting article about how you have to approach it from a human-centered perspective, and how is this making this person's job easier? And, if it's not making their job easier, then the chance that they're going to willingly adopt it is pretty minimal. And then it becomes a matter of compliance. And, we're not wanting to really be in the compliance business, right? Like, it's more fun to motivate people to adopt something on their own. So I'll see if I can find that link, and I'll pop it in the hub for everybody.
Yeah, Absolutely. I feel like it's
Yeah.
the wisdom factor, right? It's the what's in it for me. And if you can identify that early
Yeah.
on, every person who's going to use the system, then adoption and fidelity increases, I think.
Yeah. And, you know, Angela's point of like understanding people's learning style. Again, we work a lot primarily with the system admin, the Salesforce admin. Sometimes we work with some power users, but we don't generally train the entire staff. But understanding sort of like how that admin works and how they learn is really important, because some are like, just kind of give me some direction. I'm going to go and figure it out. And then I want to come back and ask questions. Some are like, let's walk through it together. I want you to watch me. I want a video. It's kind of, that's kind of a fun part of the puzzle. It's that people part, like who is this admin and how do they learn? So if you are hiring a consultant, think about that. How do you, if part of your package with a consultant is you want your admin trained, or you want all your staff trained, how do you learn? How do you train? How does the consultant work that way? Have they done that before? Have they not? Are they kind of, we train this way and only this way? I don't really know very many consultants that do that, but maybe there are, you know, like, make sure you have those kind of conversations too about how they learn. And then to a point that Amanda was making, one of the things that we have found is oftentimes it's sort of that when we get people in the room, it's interesting because sometimes with some organizations, I don't want to say it's the first time they've all been in a room together, but it's probably, they don't do it often enough, and they don't get in a room and talk about their process sometimes enough. And so the project forces that. And what we have found is really interesting. It's like someone will say, well, oh, you do that? Well, I do this. Why are we both doing that kind of thing? And what we found in many of our projects is sometimes the process, their internal processes start changing as well, because not necessarily geared by the system, but geared because they're all in the room talking. So it's kind of interesting dynamic as well.
I've noticed that as well, Karen, especially in my current role at Mission Capital, and coming in and sort of inheriting the system that was built based on preconceived business processes, but then in actuality and implementation, it did not support business processes the way that I think the consultant and our contact on staff had assumed. And so, yeah, we did a lot of gathering power users from each team in a room, 90 minutes every week, talking through processes, identifying gaps. And yeah, there was a lot of overlap. There was a lot of discrepancy. There was a lot of people doing things in a silo because it wasn't necessarily documented or communicated how they were doing things similarly, but also differently across teams. So I think, database management and build out can really tell a lot about the communication system within an organization as well, which is an interesting byproduct, certainly.
One tool that we've recently started encouraging clients to do more of, and this is often most common in large organizations, but small organizations can do it too, is the idea of having a center of excellence. Just that there's an intentional meeting and a group of people dedicated to the care and tending of the system and change management and how the system's being adopted. And so the role of governance in establishing a center of excellence is something that we've recently started talking with clients about from day one. That used to be something that we'd wait too long in the process, frankly, and we've had to change our stripes so that we start those conversations from the beginning. If there's a conflict and stakeholder A wants to do this and stakeholder B wants to do this, where does that go for the decision? And who's the deal breaker? And some of those types of things are important to think about, almost from the very beginning, even if it's just 3 people in a room or 2 people in a room that meet once a week. Hey, this is our center of excellence time. We're going to order lunch in and talk about, how what I'm doing in Salesforce that impacts my team might actually have unintended consequences for Susie in HR, and how that will affect her team. So that's one of the things that we've begun doing more of in the past year or so.
Yeah, us too. And as a solo admin, having been a solo admin in a large organization, and I'll admit it, didn't have a really great process for that prioritization, of all the requests that came in. That is huge. And in talking to a lot of admins, I led a group in the Seattle area for a while of just solo admins that were at larger organizations, just because there was a common thread there of how do they deal with some of the things. That was by far probably the biggest challenge for them, is how do they prioritize, and if there isn't that sort of governing board, or isn't depending on how their management approached it, that kind of thing, how do you make that happen? Because that's, once you have a system, the other thing we found is once people have a system that really works and they can really start seeing their data or seeing, things, all of a sudden they have even more needs because they're using the system. And that's all of a sudden, if they came from a system where they were stymied and couldn't, even if they asked for something, it could never happen. And all of a sudden now they have this sort of, the world is your oyster, or at least they feel that way. The admin can get really inundated with requests, and it's figuring out what is that process.
It's true. It's very interesting learning in all sorts of different ways. I just wanted to highlight a couple, just a few comments. Thank you. There have been a couple of really great comments from Lisa Frenberg. Thank you. The first one was, documentation at all levels. She's saying that, just being mindful that it's as thorough as, lots of help text in fields come down right to that level, but also making sure that, if there's automation or whatever, there's a description. And so somebody who comes into the organization later can really see, what drove particular decisions. So yeah, she goes document. And then the other one that I liked was a little later on that their consultant, they'd been brainstorming about what to call the database that wasn't Salesforce, because they decided Salesforce just didn't feel good for a nonprofit. So she said doing the brainstorming and then voting on a name, what they were going to call the database, was fun. And obviously it sounds like got people engaged in a slightly different way to figure that out. That's fun.
We've had clients who have done that too, who have named it something else. And I will say it has helped with user adoption. It's interesting. And we never would have thought of that, right? But our clients have, and it's been really interesting to see.
And then from Donna, something that I think we have touched on at various points in the conversation, but thank you for the reminder, is this and this kind of trying to help an organization to understand to keep it simple at first, so not put in too much automation, too many bells and whistles right at the beginning, and let people, it's kind of let the system grow as people's knowledge and experience grows. So that's
absolutely great. Yep, I fully agree with that. Because a lot of times people think they need something, and then once they get it in Salesforce and they realize it's, that is not their priority. That's not where they need the automation. They need it over here. And, but they don't know that until they've had the system and used it for a while. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I agree as well. I have direct experience with that here at Mission Capital. We had a team who really wanted a bunch of stuff automated right when I started. And so I did it for them. And then they realized, well, we need it automated, but we also need to be able to change it sometimes. But we don't really know what the rules are around when we want it automated versus changed. So I think automating things can definitely shed insight for teams onto whether or not they have a standardized practice.
Yeah. So we just have a few minutes left, and I may be asking the wrong question when we only have about 3 minutes left. But just very quickly, I know from an organization's point of view, they often feel they have an obligation to write a proposal and put out requests for a proposal. Very quickly, and we'll start with Amanda, because you did talk about proposals and evaluation. I know some consultants don't like having to do or respond to requests for proposals. Very quickly, what makes a great proposal? Or is a proposal necessary? But, from a consultant's point of view, what's helpful or what's not helpful? Did I ask the wrong question with 2 minutes to go?
Oh, what a hard question. You're not giving us a softball. Okay. Consultants, when we see an RFP come through that has like a lot of technical specifications and things broken out, like that sends a signal to us that you have a highly sophisticated technical team who hopefully will be able to engage as part of the project team. And so when we get something that's like, an Excel spreadsheet with all these things and asking you, is this native or how are you going to do this? We love getting those kind of RFPs. The RFPs that are like near impossible to respond to in any kind of accurate way are the ones where it's like 5 pages. We want a Salesforce system that will do maybe like, then there's, 3 paragraphs of narrative and we're like, oh my gosh, we have so many questions. And the hard thing about an RFP is often that you can't have the conversation with the potential client to be able to answer the questions adequately. So RFPs are really hard from a consultant perspective. I personally like doing RFPs because I'm a writer. I enjoy doing that kind of stuff. It's a challenge to get a good RFP and feel like, man, I delivered that. But they're really hard to do if you're kind of locked out from going back to the client and saying, I have a question about this. So I'd say if you're writing an RFP, please include a process where clients can ask questions and you'll respond. And then give the client enough, or give the potential consultant enough time between when those responses are given and when their proposal is turned in for them to actually process the answers that you provided. So I think that would be the main thing that I would say about an RFP is sometimes we just need more details and we need a way to get those.
And I will say we don't like RFPs. We don't typically respond to them. Sometimes Brad will have a conversation with the client, potential client, but the way we work, we want to have the conversation. I think the one thing the RFP can do for a client, if you're thinking about going to a consultant, the value from my perspective of that RFP is more, it helps you think about what you want. But yes. For us, when we get it and it says it needs to, or it must, or we want it to do these things without the why, it does not help us. We want to understand why. Why do you need that? What's the value? Because they can come up with solutions that may not be the right solution without the why. So honestly, I would spend more time thinking about what do you want out of the system? Why do you want it? What are your pains? What are your goals? And then talking to consultants versus doing an RFP.
I'd actually agree with that too. I said I like RFPs personally, but our firm in general, we feel exactly the same way. We would much rather have conversations and then be able to work on a proposal together than for it to come through an RFP where we can't have those conversations with you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. And Amanda's just said she has to go. Thank you very much, because we're a couple of moments over, but that was really helpful. I'm extremely grateful to the team and to the panelists for sharing your thoughts and conversations. Let's keep the conversation going in the Hub. I have been recording this and I will post it to the Hub. We actually are not doing office hours next Friday, but we'll be back in a few weeks' time. I will post to the Hub the next thing. But thank you very much indeed, everybody, for your time and for listening in, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.